So the last two sessions, we were able to cover the topic of marriage, and I was able to listen to both sessions, and it was such a powerful and blessed sessions that we had. And the next two sessions, we will be focusing on biblical parenting. And because parenting is a very vast topic, as I was preparing, I thought I would just focus on the foundational truth or foundational principles of marriage. And based on that, during the question and answer session, if we have to address any topics in detail, we would have the opportunity to do so. I won't be able to cover the whole, the topic in entirety today. So we would divide this into two sessions, and I'll be able to cover the first half of it. I just wanted to give you a little outline on what we will be covering. I think my cursor is not working.
Dr. Jepsin, click the down arrow. That will work probably.
Yeah, that's what I was clicking. The outline that we will be covering in the next two sessions, parenting, why it is the highest calling that anybody could ever have, and discerning the times we live in, the challenges of the current age. And then we will go into the principles, and we'll be able to address the first 4 today, and then we will cover the next 6 in the next session. Parenting has always been a biggest responsibility. It is an age-old responsibility, and especially these days, it has been very challenging. As we could see, like, we are living in end times, and there is so much of generational, cultural, societal changes that's happening everywhere around us. And in this difficult time, how to be a parent, sometimes it could be very much overwhelming. It can cause fear. It could actually wear us down, and a lot of parents are actually they're feeling the burnout these days. So in the middle of all that, knowing that it is a God-given responsibility, and He has given us the grace to do it, and it is the highest calling that we could ever have, is something that should give us the hope. One thing to understand is none of us are perfect. We are not perfect. Our children are not perfect. Many times I have seen parents who are the best parents in the world. I mean, you could see that they're genuine Christians. They're serving the Lord. They're doing everything they can to raise the children. But sometimes those children may not turn out as they want them to, or sometimes we can see that they're moving away from faith. And we would question why this happened. How can such a good parent can have a child who is turning away from faith? What we can understand is, just like we have our free will, our children also has free will. Our Heavenly Father is so patient with us, and He gives us the grace, and He loves us unconditionally, no matter what we do, and He chases relentlessly until we come back when we make a mistake. In the same way, in our parenting also, there will be seasons and times when we would have to patiently wait for our children to come back. So even though that can happen, I can say majority of the time, I would say 95% of the time, we could prevent many of the things that could happen negatively in our families and our homes. There are things that we could prevent in the lives of our children if we know how to put a solid foundation and how to do this job according to what the Bible teaches us. And that's the reason why we are here. Even in the scriptures, when we look, we can see there are godly kings, godly people who had wicked children, and there are some wicked people who had godly children. So we can see that there is a divine hand over every family, and there is a divine purpose through each and every situation. It could be unique, but in the middle of all that divine hand that has created each one of us, that has called each family by name, has a divine purpose through everything that happens in our life. So if anybody listening to me has already had their children grown up, and they have done majority of their parenting responsibility, and now they're looking back and regretting, I could have done better, I did not do the right thing. It's not too late to just come to the Lord and say, Lord, I don't think I did it right. I don't think I could do everything that I could have done. But I'm not the owner of the children. You are the owner of my children. I tried my best, but I messed up. Lord, I want them to be yours, and I want you to take over and work in their lives. And God will definitely do it. One person that always comes into my heart is Billy Graham itself. And in his book, Just As I Am, he is mentioning, he's writing to other evangelists what he went through. And he's saying, whenever I was available at home, I used to walk with my children to school and pick them up so that at least I could spend that much time with them. But I want to urge you, please don't make the same mistake I made. Through that, what he was trying to express is that, even though you think that quality time that you're spending with your children, and that's not just enough. Quantity of time is also important. Many times we say quality is more important than quantity, but we need to have face-to-face time with our children as much as possible. When we say it is the highest calling, what does it mean? Anybody can be a parent. I have seen so many of my friends who is from other religions. They're doing a fine job, excellent job in raising their children, much more devoted than us, like how much time we spend with our children. But bringing a godly offspring in the biblical term, a promised seed that God promised Eve, even in the middle of her mess up, when God comes down and say that I am going to give you an offspring who is going to overcome this evil and who is going to trample over the enemy. And he is giving that promise to Eve. And we see that through the generations, that promised seed, how it just got more and more revealed, and how Jesus Christ came through her generations. And even after that, as New Testament believers, how by faith we are called the promised seed, right? We have a big responsibility to establish the kingdom of God here on earth, and our generations are also called for the same. So it is the highest calling. It is just more than child rearing. It is just more than reproducing the next generation. It is much beyond that. We are in a spiritual warfare. We are given the highest authority and to overcome the evil and build and establish God's kingdom here. So how can we raise the generation that will stand for God? In Malachi chapter 2, verse 15, it says, did he not make them one with the portion of the Spirit in their union? And what was that one God seeking? Godly offspring. So guard yourself in your spirit, and let none of you be faithless to the wife of your youth. Here, God is clearly speaking against divorce. And he's saying, don't you know that it is one God who made you? The one God, the three-in-one, who works unitedly. Don't you know that that one God made you? And did he not make you one with a portion of the Spirit in your union? Then why now you are trying to separate? Do you know the purpose why you were united? It is to bring forth godly offspring. This was in the center of heart. Many times we think, okay, child rearing, parenting, it is for mothers, or let me just give birth to the children. They will just grow by themselves. I have seen some older people saying that. I think maybe 100 years ago, that was how things were. And it was okay to be like that too. We know that we had extended family systems. We had 10 or 12 kids in one household. And both parents, they struggled. They worked hard to earn. They were farmers. They had to earn for their living every day, working hard. And they just didn't have much time to spend with their kids. But they had a society. They had a community around them. Morality was much more established, and it was a close-knit community where there were deeper interactions, deeper connections. Even though parents were busy, there were siblings, cousins, uncles, aunts, grandparents, everybody around them to raise them. It was a collective effort. But that times have changed these days, and it is purely on the mother and father. In most families, both of them are working. They don't even have enough time to spend with their children. Children are inside the house most of the time, not having any connections with the outside world other than through their social media or their friends at school, which are not usually good influences. So one thing we have to understand is that we are living in a very different time where there is so much going on to destroy the family. There is so much of external and internal challenges and influences that is trying to destroy the institution of family. In the middle of all that, being united with the wife God has given you, because it's just two of you, nobody else to really have a good influence on your child. You can't count on the society. You can't count on anybody else. You have to do it. And if you don't have that oneness in marriage, how are you going to do this? If you are not in union with God and union with each other, how are things going to be aligned? How do you know the God's intention? How do you know the God's dream about your child? How would you be able to raise a child according to the purpose that is divine on that child? Oneness in marriage is the most essential thing to produce a godly offspring. Also, we have to understand that father and mother both have significant and unique roles. Fathers, you may have a lot of responsibilities. You might be a very highly achieving, accomplished person, very successful in what you're doing. It is applicable to mothers also these days, but you have a unique role that is not replaceable by anyone else. In a family setting, it is usually the mother who gives love and nurturing to the children, but usually the safety, the security, the identity, the confidence, all that is built based on the relationship the father has to the daughter or son. Especially with boys, when they go into the teenage years, if they don't have a control from their dad, they could go really wild. And it will be really difficult for the mom to take a control over the situation in that situation. So it is important to have a father and mother equally involved, equally intentionally parenting the children. It is a commandment with urgency, and it is not a suggestion. When we go to Deuteronomy chapter 6 through 9, and these words that I command you today shall be on your heart. You shall teach them diligently to your children, and shall talk of them when you sit in your house, and when you walk by the way, and when you lie down, and when you rise. You shall bind them as a sign on your hand, and they shall be as frontlets between your eyes. You shall write them on the doorpost of your house and on your gates. We see that this portion is written right before Moses died as his last words, very important. And this is part of the Shema prayer that Jewish people prayed day and night. This was in the center of their heart, and God is telling them as a commandment with an urgency, and he is very specifically saying, if you read the verses right before that, it says it's not just your children, your children's children that you should teach them. You should teach them diligently. And how do you teach? It should be a constant conversation. When you sit, when you walk, when you lie down, when you rise. It is not just in the evening prayer. It is not just during the dinner time. It is not just on Sunday morning. It is not just in church. It is not done by Sunday school teacher. It's not done by your pastor. Who is teaching this? Parents. Teach diligently your children constantly, continuously, every second, every moment, through every life circumstance. whatever that is going on. Make it as an opportunity and teach. God be the center of your conversation. It should be saturated by God. Your conversation should be saturated by God. He should be the priority. He should be the center of your home. See how important and how divine and how holy this is. This is a serious task God has given us. Have you lost that reverence? Have you been distracted by the million things that's going on in our lives these days? It is a question that we should ask ourselves. Out of all the parenting responsibilities, the greatest responsibility is to introduce our children to Jesus. And who is the one to do it? Parents itself. There was actually a study that was conducted by Barna recently. And the study was asking parents and church leaders about their opinion on who should be teaching the scriptural truths to the children. 49% of the parents said they should be teaching it, but the other 51% said it should be the church's responsibility. On the other hand, the church leaders, 95% of them said it should be the parents teaching the scriptural truth to their children. We can see the same type of response in our society too. When things go wrong, we have a tendency to blame church, others, for what happened in our children's life. One thing we have to understand is if there are 7 days a week, 24 hours a day, how much of time the Sunday school teacher has? How much of time your pastor has or the youth leader has? 1 or 2 hours. And even that 1 or 2 hours, we don't know our child is fully engaged in what they're listening. And the majority of the time, they're in school, they're with their friends, they're on the social media. And who has the rest of it? It is parents. Parents are the chief influential people in a child's life. One more thing to understand is, once your children are grown up, they're married, they're on their own, don't think that your responsibility is finished. Parenting is multi-generational. Grandparents, your responsibility is not over. A story that I've mentioned before is Jonathan Edward. He was the one who brought the Great Awakening in America. And it was his grandfather who mentored him, who influenced his life. So it is not just the parents, it is the grandparents, it is the cousins, immediate family, church family. You all have a responsibility in parenting, not just your children, but in the lives of the children around you too. Matthew 7:24, those who hear the words of Jesus and puts them into practice is like the wise man who built his house on the rock. We all know this. We all have heard the words of Jesus. But have you ever thought of a house that is built with not a good foundation? When it falls down, who gets the collateral damage? It is our foolishness. It is because we did not listen to the words. We did not put them into practice. We messed up as parents. But who is suffering the damage through it? It is our children. And their generations. You know that many generational patterns, it continues. It escalates from generation to generation. We can see that in the scripture. When you look into the life of the patriarchs, you see that Abraham, a little bit of favoritism between Isaac and Ishmael. You know what happened when it came to Isaac's family? In Abraham's house, Ishmael was sent out. When it came to Isaac's family, you know that Jacob had to run away because his brother was about to kill him. And when it came to Jacob's family, it escalated. They sold Joseph, it all stemming from favoritism, comparison. They sold Joseph and he was put in prison and he had to go through, all things Joseph had to go through. He was separated. He was even considered to be dead for a while, brought so much grief to the father. So it escalates. Little things like favoritism and comparison in our family atmosphere, it escalates from generation to generation. Sibling rivalry, you can just name it. it just escalates from generation to generation. But you know what the scriptures say? Our God is a God who keeps his covenant and mercy for 1,000 generations, for those who walk according to his purpose. So the wise man who built his house on the rock of ages, God himself, you know how he does it? It's by putting the things in practice. Every commandment, what is in the mind of Christ, you're putting it into practice. You're coming into the simplicity of life. You're coming into the genuine relationship with God. You're loving him with all your heart and your full reverence, your priority, everything becomes God. You know, when you do that sincere faith, that's all you need. Your generations, for thousands of generations, they become the builders of ancient ruins. They become people who build foundations of many generations around them. Whatever enemy has destroyed, they will be called the repairer of the breach. So it is a big responsibility. When we do that, we are not just putting foundations for our children, but we are also putting foundations for many other families through our children. When they become the powerful force in God's hands, when they become the instruments in God's hand to repair the breach of other families, see how much kingdom would expand. See, it's not just all about ministry. It's not just all about our profession. It's not just all about doing and performing things. Come back to the foundations. Come back to the basic principle. What was in the mind of in the mind of God? You just need to live, dwell in the land, faithfully serve the Lord, raise your children, and use the opportunities that God gives you. But you don't have to chase after your dreams. You don't have to be ambitious about even in ministry. You just need to follow Christ and his commandments and his voice and be faithful in that little things and in raising your children. You see, God's hand, God's might, God's strength will start moving through you and through your generations, and he will be able to do things that you cannot do by your own strength. We're going to just talk a little bit about what is going on in the times that we live in. What has happened to our society and what is the challenges that our children are facing. We just briefly talked about what happened in the community setting, how our children are segregated. You know, a close-knit community is not that close-knit anymore. Families have disintegrated. We are in the nuclear family system, and not just that, the adult systems like schools and sports and every other institution that is to nurture the kids and their personality and help them to assimilate into the community has failed in doing that job, because it has all become about performance, doing a project program where, you know, the sports, it was to nurture the personality, but it has become so competitive and so stressful for the kids. Schools, all about grades and accomplishments when it is to help them assimilate to the community. Churches, it's all about programs. It's not about walking in the spirit or having that community of Christ coming together and enjoying the fellowship and the relationships with each other. No, it has diverted from it so much, and it has all become into performing and doing programs. So who is actually getting the damage? Who is suffering through all this? It is our little children. Lack of authentic relationship with God. It is so hard to find the resilient disciples these days. And as parents also, sometimes our minds have gotten so calloused that many times we do things out of ritual, but we have lost our vibrant faith, our prayer life, our walk with Christ. There's so much of stress from overstimulation through social media, technology, and the moral decay. You just, it is difficult to just explain it with words. There's no absolute truth anymore. We're living in a world of moral relativism. Whatever I think is true for me, it may be not true for you, but if I believe that is true, it is true for me. That is the world we live in. If a child believes he's a wolf, he's a wolf. If a child believes he's a cat, he's a cat. If a child believes he's a man, he's a man. A woman, he's a woman. There is no absolute truth. They can choose the pronoun. They can address themselves with whatever they want, and the teachers or the authority has to affirm it. They cannot correct the child. That is the world we live in. How much more our kids would be confused if we are not teaching them the truth? How are they going to survive in this generation? There were things that we were so embarrassed to talk to our kids when it comes to sex and love and all those things. My parents, my mom was very ashamed to talk to me about it. But we are living in a world, we have to address it. And at what age? There is no early age at this time. I mean, that is the world we live in. You know, last year in September of 2022, they were planning to pass a law that will allow in New Jersey. It is happening in New Jersey, not in Texas. In the first grade, they were planning on giving gender identity lessons to the kids. See, as a 5-year-old, as a 6-year-old, they are getting exposed to all these things. Who is going to teach them all these? Who can address these? It's parents themselves. I mean, of course, there's a role church and Sunday school can do, but more than anybody else, it is in the family atmosphere that we should be teaching children the truth. Our children are so disconnected and lonely. You know how much connected we are through technology, but as much as we are connected, we are disconnected too. And it only gets worse as they go into their teen years. In the middle, especially in the middle school, kids are so mean to each other. They don't have empathy. They don't know how to treat, how to talk, and so much. I mean, they're so much under fear that they'll get rejected. There's nobody to sit with them during lunch hour. There's nobody to sit with them when they go to a field trip. They're carrying all the stress. They're in a negative environment. They're thinking that nobody likes them. They're thinking that they're always lonely and everybody hates them. And they come into the home and it should be a safe haven. Instead of that, there is a parent who is always like a business parent, trying to discipline them. Why did you do this way? Why didn't you make 100 out of 100? Why did you do that? You could have done that better. How would that child take it? Think about it. Our children are so insecure, depressed, disconnected, lonely. They have so much of negativity within them, and they're living in a toxic environment. We are the ones to encourage them, to support them. That doesn't mean that you should not discipline them, but we should do it very, very gently. We live in a very self-centered and narcissistic generation, especially in our Indian community. We could be a little more protective, and we could actually reinforce that self-centeredness if we are not being very careful. It is all about me, brand Jesus is the way things are going these days. So we have to be very careful. What can we do in a situation like this? We kind of went through the problems. And in a nutshell, what we are seeing is there is no deep relationships. Kids are so segregated, they're disconnected, they're lonely. Even they don't trust the adult systems anymore because they have been unintentionally abandoned by them, that they have lost the trust in adults. By the time they're 14 or 15, they don't want to trust adults anymore. That's the world we live in. So when we have so much of confusion, when we don't even have anybody, or when the children are not being taught in the truth and they're in a confused state and disconnected state, that's where our parenting strategy should be much more tailored and much more focused on how we can help our children in this situation. Let's just go one by one, those basic principles. As number one, love God with your whole being. And I don't know if I have to re-emphasize it again. You all know that we just talked on it. The Shema prayer, the first and the most important principle. Everything else will fall in place if we have right relationship with God as parents. The biggest example of that is the life of Abraham and Isaac itself. You know that Abraham, when his faith was tested, God asked Abraham to sacrifice his son Isaac. You could see that Isaac did not resist it. He did not say a word. Even when Abraham was putting him on the altar, he did not resist it. Bible doesn't say that. He was fully obedient. Isaac was fully obedient up until death, you could say. How can a child, a teenager, be that obedient to his father? We see Abraham was a man of faith. He had a strong connection with God. He was called the friend of God. Abraham, through his connection with God, through his faith and trust in God, how he lived has definitely influenced Isaac. We see that there is so much of unity. There is no rebellion. Whatever the dad say, Isaac is all for it. It is easy for our children to obey and love us. It's easy for the family to come together when there is Christian love, when there's godly love within our family atmosphere. When we love God, it's easy to love others. Union with God will bring union with your wife, husband, and will keep the family together. As we talked, every home should be a sanctuary, which makes it a safe haven. God should be in every conversation. Children model their parents and it becomes their identity. This is especially true with boys. Boys learn more with their parents' model, like seeing the model. So it is important as parents to not just preach, not just speak the word, but also show how we live through our life, be a model to them. And that becomes the identity of the child. And I want to ask this question: if that is the truth, if God is the number one priority, if we are to love God with all our being, what is hindering us from doing that? Many times we're overworked, we're overcommitted, there's so much of distractions in our family, and so many things to choose from. If you go to the store, if you have to buy a toothpaste, there's 100 different options for you to choose from, and it takes at least a few minutes to decide, right, what I want. There is so much that you could fill your life with. We are living in an era of instant gratification. I mean, if you're bored, if you're restless, you can just get out with your car, go for shopping, do whatever you want, order more food. We're living in an age where we have so much of opportunities, or so much of options in front of us. I remember, I used to go for shopping multiple times a week because sometimes I remember I don't have something in the kitchen, I will go buy it. I did not even realize how much time I'm wasting through that until COVID hit, when we were all limited, when how many times we would go out to the store. So we started limiting, right, going out to the store once every 2 weeks, and there was so much time in hand. I'm like, wow, a little thing can make that much of a difference. How many things that we could do much more orderly and organized in our life, where we have more time to spend with God and with our children, having meaningful conversations and again, imparting our faith and the truth into their lives. Are we burnt out? You shall have no other gods before me. If I have to love my God with my all being, there should not have any other gods in front of me. We are living in a world, we have so many gods around us. Even in our life, it is a question to ask ourselves, do I love something else more than God? We're living in an age where it's all about self-promotion, brand me. Everybody's trying to make a name for themselves, even in the spiritual realm, even in the church setting. It has all become performance, building a name. Children even feel pressured that they have to prove themselves to be accepted or to be chosen into something, and they feel that pressure. No, our life should not be like that. It has even made the concept of brand Jesus. We are trying to improve things where it is more appealing to people, more attractive to people, instead of preaching the pure gospel and the cross and the suffering and the servant leadership. Instead of teaching, instead of modeling that, we have come into this consumeristic attitude of just making our services much more better, appealing, where more people are attracted. You're trying to make it attractive. You're falling away. You're falling away from what God intended us to be. We're falling away from the simplicity of faith. We're falling away from genuine relationship with God. Of course, we have to use technology. We have to encourage our children. We have to make things better. There is nothing wrong with God, with that. But if what we all have is just a structure, and there is no relationship with God in it, there is no genuine relationship with each other, there is no nurturing interpersonal connections, it's all about competition and performance. No, that is an unhealthy society, unhealthy family, unhealthy community that we are building. So it is a question for us to ask ourselves. Second principle, accept your child as God's masterpiece. We all have children. We all have children who are very unique and different, right? Ephesians chapter 2, verse 10 says, "For we are his workmanship, created in Christ Jesus for good works, which God prepared beforehand that we should walk in them." We see that each one of us are God's masterpiece, means the best of best. I don't have to explain that word to you. You have probably heard that many times. Sometimes it's hard to accept it when we see some defects in our children. If you have a disabled child, how can you say that this is God's masterpiece? How would you accept it as God's masterpiece? Many times we cry, we get pressured, we get anxious, especially certain type of disabilities where the disability is very subtle. We are worried about how other people will view it. We can't explain, we cannot be honest and vulnerable about it. But at the same time, we struggle and we cry inside. Why my child is not sitting still in Sunday service? What would other people say? Other people would think that I'm not parenting this child right, but that child may have an ADD or attention deficit disorder. There are so much of autistic tendencies in our children. Looking at those children, how can you say that they're God's masterpiece? How can you be at ease and fully satisfied with God, what God has given you, and accept them as the best gift God has given you? I wanted to share my life story. I had a brother who had cerebral palsy. He was born at prematurely at 7 months, and he was completely bedridden. He only had the brain capacity of a 2-month-old child. He could not even recognize us. And it was a long 20 years before he went to be with the Lord. Our parents cared for him. I have never seen them complaining about him. I have never seen them asking God, why did you give this son? I have never seen that. They came to the city of Thrissur. The church started, the first 6 years was really hard. Nobody came to the Lord. They were doing door-to-door personal evangelism. But after he was born, things started shifting, things changing. Even though they have a child in their hand, they're still preaching gospel. They're still saying that Jesus loves you and he can heal you. He's the answer for your prayers and all that. But people were attracted by their joy, their hope in the Lord. I can say that his life molded us more than anything any person, any mentor can ever do. Even though he never spoke a word, his life molded us, and his life made us more into the image of Christ. And he was the best blessing that we could ever ask. Even though we don't wish those type of blessings on anybody, when it happens in our life, always remember that there is a special purpose of God, a divine purpose, a special work that he's trying to do through that. I have heard the story of a mother who always used to cry, Lord, why did you give me a disabled child? What did I do wrong? Look at all these women. I think I'm much better than them. I have been more faithful to you, but why did you give this child to me? And one day she kept crying and crying. One day the Lord decided to come down to her, and he told her, I was looking around. I had to create this child. One creation should see another creation and glorify God. So I had to actually create every kind of creation, different types of people. And I had to create this child. And I looked. I did not see anybody as faithful as you who would take a good care of this child. That day she stopped crying, because that day she understood there is a purpose. It just did not happen accidentally. It was not a punishment of God, but this came with a purpose. She started taking care of that child with full happiness and joy in her heart. Many times we use our theology. We would say, oh, it's because of that person's wrongdoings or sin. It's a punishment and all of that. We know the story of the blind man who was blind from birth, and disciples were asking Jesus the same question, why was he born blind? And Jesus is saying, it is for the work of the Lord to be revealed in his life. So God allow children with defects and deficiencies, and he will show his glory through their lives. Philippians chapter 2, verse 13, for it is not your strength, it is an amplified version, but it is God who is effectively at work in you, both to will and to work, that is strengthening, energizing, and creating in you the longing and the ability to fulfill your purpose for his good pleasure. So there is a God who works in and through our life, through our difficulties, through our weaknesses, through our strength, but it's ultimately him doing the work, not us. Maybe it is not the way that we want the work to be done, but if we yield our life to him, when we get to eternity, we will see the big impact that God has done through the difficulties that we have been through. We have to trust God with that. But if you can come into that level of trust in God, you will see God miraculously moving through your life and through your generation's life. Bless your children and speak life into them. They may have certain type of developmental delay or certain attitude problems, or they could be very, very difficult or tough to parent. But if there is one thing that you could speak positively, if there is something that you like, if there is some good values that you see in them, just mention it and talk to them and encourage them and bless them and speak life into them, so that they won't be completely broken when it is the time for correction. Third principle is truth and relationship. Truth and relationship should go hand in hand. We just went through what is going on in the current age, what is lacking. There is no absolute truth and there is no relationship. And because of that same reason, it is very important for us to keep this in mind, that truth and relationship both are essential and both should go hand in hand. In Psalm 26, verse 3, I have been constantly aware of your unfailing love, and I have lived according to the truth. Here David is saying, Lord, I have lived according to the truth. Do you know why? I have been constantly aware of your unfailing love. He's saying, I have been constantly aware of your unfailing love. To win any child's heart, it is the unfailing love that is needed. When that unfailing love, the constant love, the unconditional love, that presence of you in their life, they will live according to the truth that you teach them. Jesus said, and you will know the truth, and the truth will set you free. So it is important for our children to know the truth, and it's only the truth that is going to set them free. They need to know who Jesus is. They need to know what scripture is all about, what biblical values are. We should be able to develop biblical worldview at a very young age. Truth without a relationship causes rebellion. You could be speaking truth to your children day and night, correcting them, disciplining them, always speaking to them. You could be that business parent, always trying to correct day and night. But if you don't have a relationship, when you say the relationship, it is a close, intimate, it is an emotional bond or a connection where the child sees and know and experience that my dad, my love, my mom, she loves me, he loves me unconditionally. No matter what I do, they will be there for me. Even if I mess up, even if I make a bad grade, they're still there. It's not the grades or the achievement. As a person, they value me. They see me as their hero. That should be the feeling a child has. If you can instill that into the child, and that you cannot artificially make it, you have to really see your child as a masterpiece. You have to accept them. You have to see the divine plan in them. You have to trust God enough to do that in spite of their weaknesses or the problems the child has. And if you can't come to that level, whatever truth that you speak into that child's life, he will follow it or she will follow it. Relationship without truth causes apathy. This is also important. Many times what has happened in our community is We came from India. Our younger people, children, they're grown here, younger youth, they're grown here. And we have a myth or a false belief that, oh, it's hard to relate with these children. It's difficult to relate with them because I was born and I grew up in a different circumstance or a culture. I would never be able to relate. And because of that fear in our heart, many times we say hi to them, but we are hesitant to just go deeply in our relationship and mentor them or connect with them because we feel a little resistance there. That is just a myth. Children are not looking for the same experiences or same culture or anything. First of all, they have lost the trust in adult system. If you can build a trust with them, if you can show that you genuinely care about them and they can be vulnerable and open with you, they'll come. They'll love you as uncle or auntie or whoever that you are to them. They will want to build a connection with them. So that is a myth. Many times, why the children are not interested in us, our church youth is not interested in us, is because we have stopped telling them the truth. Our relationships are very superficial. We are afraid to tell them the truth. We think they don't accept us. And that has caused so much of disinterest in the children. If you can establish a close emotional bond with your child, you win. Fill your child's love bank, balance the positives and negatives. We'll come to it later when we talk about disciplining. Cultivate good connections with people in the community. It's not just you and your children. Relationships outside the family, in the church setting, extended family, all is important in the growth of a child. For any person to be a healthy young adult, they need at least 5 people who love them and accept them unconditionally. So try to build good connections. Build trust. That is the remedy for generational gap. Of course, there is a generation gap, but how can we bridge it? We have to build a trust. And it's especially the first 9 years of life that we have to develop attachment with a child. Time is running out, so I'm trying to be a little fast here, rush through this part. Attachment and connection, it starts in the mother's womb. The umbilical cord, the attachment that the baby has when the mother, breastfeed and nurture and all that. And that attachment, it has to be built within the first 9 years. As parents, if you are not in your child's life, if you're working constantly and being away from them, and you have very minimal interaction with them, by the age of 10, they will start to kind of disconnect from you. You may not see it until 14 or 15, when they're bold enough to say that to you or show that. And when they're closer to their friends at that age, they will completely leave you. So please don't wait until then to start parenting or start building connection. It starts the minute they're born. Show that you genuinely care. Have a free playtime. The best way to connect with children is through play. It could be like 20 minutes of floor play when the children are babies. But as they get older, you need to spend more time with them playing board games or whatever that is interesting to them, sports or just the activity that they like. Join them, let them lead it. That's how you connect with them and build a relationship with them. And be real. Family is the place where you can openly admit your mistakes and ask for forgiveness from each other. Depend on God's grace. As parents also, we need grace. Many times we make a lot of mistakes. It's okay to be real about them. Speak the truth in love. We just we're talking about the truth, how much it is important for us to communicate the truth to our children, but we have to speak it in love. Should we stop here after this? And I think I have a few more slides to go, and it's almost 9 o'clock. The truth in love and develop a biblical worldview. We just talked about it. It is the responsibility of the parent to teach the truth, not the church or Sunday school teacher. Talk to them about everything that is happening around, including difficult topics such as sex, love, and dating. Prepare them for adolescence. When you look at a person's behavior, the behavior is like the tip of the iceberg, but what it really comes from is the base of all that is relationship. What drives a person's behavior? It is the values. What affect the value system? It is their beliefs. Where is that belief coming from? It's from the relationship. Only if they have a relationship with you, they'll believe you, they'll take your word. So build a relationship that could build a belief system and values, and later on will turn as their behavior. What is happening today in churches, in families? There is no connection. If the parents are, detached from the children, unintentionally, probably abandoned by their stress and conflict in the marriage or family setting. There is no relationship with God. There is so much of societal bad influences. There is no support groups, godly friends, no community to belong to, and they're just becoming prodigal sons. They're going away from faith. And when you look at the life of a resilient disciple, we see there's a safe haven and a secure base, godly parents, Christ in the center of the family. They're connected to God. Early on in their life, they have had an encounter with God, and the parents are able to build some connections with the community and friendships, godly friendships that give them a place to belong to, which further nourish their development. I'm going to stop right here. I will start from number 4 at the next session. Maybe a few minutes for question and answer.